morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar organized by Johan Cruyff Institute and with our partners for National Football Consulting. Everybody in baseball is familiar with the term Moneyball, which is aided by Brad Pitt's role as a Billy Beane in the popular movie. So today we will dedicate today's session to talk about how we can apply this in football. Four Nations Football Consulting believes that the recruitment solution enables clubs to find players that can help them reach their objectives through statistical modeling. Brandon Fourier, co-founder of Four Nation Football Consulting, will tell us more about this. I would like to remind all the attendees that you can also participate in the conversation, typing your question to our speakers in the questions tab. You can see at the bottom right of your screen. And in case you cannot follow the whole session, don't worry about it. You will receive the recording afterwards. So let's get started. Brandon, welcome. It's a pleasure having you today. The floor is yours, and see you all at the end of the session.
Thank you very much, Edgar. I really appreciate the introduction and the chance for us to present. And on that note, thank you to everyone who's attending the webinar today and is interested in this topic. I think it's a very popular topic among sports fans. So hopefully you find the session interesting. So just to tell you a little bit about what we'll be discussing today, I'll give a brief introduction of myself, our company, and the partner company that we are building this or that we built this recruitment solution with, ZAQ. We'll talk a little bit about the inefficiencies in football recruitment. There are a lot that we've identified, but we'll stick to sort of the main points that we have built solutions for. Then we'll talk about the solutions to those problems that we've built, and then we'll talk a little bit about the similarities to Moneyball, as obviously is the name of the session, and we'll see how that translates to football and how our solutions are similar to what you've seen in the movie or might have read in Michael Lewis's book. And afterwards, we'll have a short Q&A where hopefully I can answer some of your questions. So just an introduction of myself. My name is Brandon Fourier. As Edgar mentioned, I'm co-founder of Four Nations Football Consulting. We are a Barcelona-based consulting firm, football consulting firm, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we do and where we are in the next slide. My education background is I have an honors degree in accounting from the University of Stellenbosch, based in South Africa. I then did a master in football business at the Johan Cruyff Institute in partnership with FC Barcelona. I then also did a certificate as a football tactical analyst with the Barca Innovation Hub. And I also did a Maths Behind Moneyball course with the University of Houston, which, as the name says, it teaches you sort of the mechanics behind what happened in the book and in the movie, and sort of how they calculated all the smart things that you see in the movie. Then I have three years and a bit experience with Deloitte. I worked 3 years in the Cape Town office as an auditor and 3 months in the Chicago office as a consultant. And after our master studies, myself and 3 of my classmates started Four Nations Football Consulting. So a little bit more about Four Nations Football Consulting. We, like I said, Barcelona-based football consulting firm. We aim to be a one-stop shop for football clubs, and that goes from transaction services, helping clubs with the internationalization of their brand, and sort of the monetizing of their assets that they have available to them, and of course now the data analysis and recruitment processes, which we'll be discussing today. And as you can see, we are based in Barcelona, but we do have quite a wide reach across the world with our four NFC members, business collaborators, and some partner companies that sort of are specialists in their field that we get on board to combine experience and know-how to give our clients the best service that we can. And we'll be discussing one of those partner companies, ZAQ. So the ZAQ group of companies, we approach them to sort of say, look, there are these inefficiencies in football. We've analyzed the market. We've seen what's out there, what clubs are doing in terms of buying and selling players, and how we think we could do things differently to benefit clubs. And ZAQ is a leading actuarial consultancy that offers a wide range of services across various industries in Africa, Middle East, and the Asia Pacific regions. So their services include short and life insurance, data analytics, some accounting guidelines, and damages and road accident fund valuations. So basically, we approach them to say, look, we've identified these problems. You are the statistical modeling and the background data guys. So help us to build solutions that can actually benefit clubs in real life. And it's just there's just an example of some of the clients that ZAQ have, and we've partnered with them to tackle these inefficiencies and build our solutions that we'll talk about now. So let's talk about the inefficiencies in football recruitment, right? So we all love a transfer window and to see how clubs buy and sell players, especially if it's your club on the buying side, not so much if your club's on the selling side. But we believe that football clubs and the people who run football clubs have the wrong starting point for assessing who to buy and who to sell and at what price, right? So what we're currently seeing is that there are a lot of data providers and companies that provide amazing insights. I mean, this is not a stab at any of these companies. We really believe their solutions are really, really good. We just believe that clubs don't have the processes in place to use these tools and tools that we've developed in the right process and at the right time, right? So at the moment, we see that clubs are assessing their squads using these skill indexes. So if you look on the right-hand side, you can see a squad that we have here that has, it's Napoli squad that has a skill index, right? So it's basically a bunch of stats that go into an algorithm, and for each position, it gives an index to give you an idea of which players are performing better than others, right? So they use these skill indexes along with input from various staff members, that could be a manager, sporting director, your academy director, to sort of assess their squad and say, this is what we've got. These are the players according to the skill indexes that are performing better than others. The managers might say this guy is better for the team, he's training better than this guy, all these kind of things. But what we are seeing is that we're not sure what these indexes mean for you, right? So yes, it can give you an idea in terms of your squad and ranking them, but how do these indexes or rankings correlate to the main thing, as we like to call it, the main thing, which is the league table, points, goals scored, goals conceded, and ultimately your club's objectives, which might be to be in the Champions League, not get relegated, to win the league. How do these indexes correlate directly to that, right? And that's the problem that we see when clubs start at this point with indexes and these kind of things, that they sort of missed a few steps, right? So once clubs have these indexes and they have these meetings with all this qualitative and quantitative inputs, now they sort of have an idea who they want to be replacing, maybe with younger players, maybe with a different country player. There are different reasons. But then they use these tools to look for similar players to the ones they're trying to replace, right? And that brings us to our next inefficiency, that the wrong questions are being asked, right? So if you've identified a player in your squad using these indexes and qualitative inputs, and now you use these companies that provide these insights to find similar players, if you're constantly replacing the players you have with similar ones, aren't you stagnating? I mean, I know it's a similarity in terms of style, right? But of course, style is very important. But how do you correlate that directly to what we discussed earlier, which is the league table, points, goals scored, goals conceded, and your objective, right? So yes, someone might say that the playing style is similar and this player is better based on some stats and some qualitative inputs. But how do you quantify how much better that player is, right? So the one that's similar to the one you're replacing. And once you've identified, okay, he might be better, he or she, but in this case with our Napoli example, how do you quantify by how much he's better, right? Because ultimately you're replacing players to improve your squad, right? To go up in the league table. I think I I speak for 99% of football clubs that they always want to be finishing higher, right? So how do you quantify that improvement? I mean, this is another example of a similarity profile for Karim Benzema. So you might be a team in the Austrian league that is looking for a player that plays similarly to Karim Benzema, right? Right. So this list on the right is a list of players that play in La Liga, but you might look for a Karim Benzema type player, right? So that's all good and well, but what does that mean for you in terms of how many extra goals will you score? How many goals will you concede less? And what does that mean in terms of points and moving up and down the league table, right? It's a lot of data at the wrong time, in the wrong step in the process for us. And that brings us onto our next inefficiency, which is a data overload. I mean, there've been talks about the data tsunami in football and all these kind of things, and we think it's really good, and companies have really grabbed onto that and sort of given great insights, but it's a data overload at the wrong stage of the process, right? Too much is being assessed on too many players too early in the recruitment process. A lot of twos in there, but we think it's too much too early, right? So I always use the example of Aaron Wan-Bissaka when 2 years ago Manchester United were looking for a right back, and it was rumored that they had scouting reports on 804 right backs. All right, that doesn't mean all 804 of them were targets of theirs, but they whittled that down to 50 right backs, right? So that was 50 right backs, which they've done a good job to get down from 804. But now you've got 50 right backs who you need to analyze in terms of data, in terms of video scouting, and in terms of live scouting, right? And then you need to decide on the person as well, right? What is his character like? Will he be able to adapt? Is it possible to even sign him? All these kind of things. And I mean, if you're looking at 50 right backs and you expect your recruitment department to find the right one, then I'm not so sure, because that is nigh on impossible. And I mean, I think I speak for most Manchester United fans, and I think even the management at this stage, that Aaron Wan-Bissaka was not the right back. But it doesn't surprise me if there was a short list of 50, right? So clubs aren't filtering players initially based on the main thing. And we keep coming back to this by saying, keep the main thing, right? You need to first find the data that correlates directly to the league table, points, goals scored and conceded, and ultimately objectives, right? That needs to be the starting point. So we feel clubs are firstly, I mean, starting at the wrong point. There's a data overload, and then they're asking the wrong questions as well. So these three factors for us are the three sort of big inefficiencies in football. And we've sat with ZAQ and developed a process, firstly, and then different tools within that process to tackle these inefficiencies. So just to look at this example again of a profile of Neymar. I mean, it doesn't take a football scout or an analyst or whoever to know that Neymar is one of the best players in the world, right? And here he's been compared to Kylian Mbappe, right? But yet again, I'm trying to understand what all these plot graphs mean. I mean, yes, it's amazing, it looks good, and it's easy to compare the two players, right? But what does it mean in terms of the main thing, right? The main thing is scoring goals, not conceding goals, getting points, and moving up the league. So if I'm a club and I want to be winning the league, right? I know if I have Neymar, my chances are better, right? But if I'm on a budget trying to win the league, is Mbappe the man for me, or is Neymar the man for me, right? So if you don't quantify how many goals Neymar contributes to the team and how much contribution he has in terms of the defensive side, you'll never be able to say, look, Neymar is the one for me, for my objective and my budget and these kind of things. Or maybe if Neymar is contributing that much, but for me, it doesn't take that much to win the league, there might be a cheaper alternative. But if you don't quantify that and have a process of analyzing where you are and where you want to be and what every player brings to that process or that objective, you'll never be able to make the call. And quite frankly, you'll get lost in the data, as we see in these plot graphs. Right. So what are the Four Nations Football Consulting and ZAQ solutions to the problems that we have, right? So the biggest one is the wrong starting point, right? As we said, clubs dive in with these indexes, with qualitative contributions, which we know are affected by recency bias and all these kind of biases that we as humans have, right? So now they immediately jump in and they say, all right, look, let's assess the squad, let's decide who to buy and to sell. But there's no quantification or process of first taking a step back and saying, where are we, where do we want to go, and who can get us there, right? So our proposed solution is 6-pronged. So the first one is to identify the club's objective, right? Identify and quantify, right? We'll get to quantify. Firstly, the club needs to say, look, either this year or the year after or in 5 years, I want to finish in the top 4. I don't want to be relegated. I want to win the league, right? So that needs to be identified. Then we quantify the current performance level of the club. And to do that, we use probability math, right? So we use expected goal difference to quantify that. And we'll get onto that in more detail. Thirdly, we quantify the performance level required to reach that objective, right? Because if you don't know where you're going, you will never get there, right? So we need to first identify that, then quantify it. Then what we do, we assess the current squad. And I know now you're thinking, yes, but you just said indexes aren't great and these kind of things. Agreed. But into those indexes are so many data points, right? It's about passing stats, tackling stats, shooting stats, crossing stats, running stats, physical stats, all these kind of things, right? But in point number 4, when we say assess the current squad, we want to be assessing the current squad in terms of who is contributing to the main thing, right? And the main thing is points, goals scored, goals conceded, and where that takes you on the league table, right? So that is the main thing. We assess the current squad by finding the stats that correlate directly to the league table, right? Which for 99% of the clubs is what keeps them going, right? I mean, even if your club's objective is to develop and sell players, you can only do that if you remain in a certain division, right? So we look for stats in point number 4 that correlate directly to league position, right? And then 5th, we obtain a short list of players capable of replacing your weakest links to reach your objective, right? So this is all of these restraints and things in the market are put into our model, and it gives you a short list of players, right? Once we have the short list of players, we utilize relevant data. Now, this is club relevant data, right? So once we've now assessed players who contribute directly to the league table, and we've got a list of players that can get us to our objective, we now need to find in that list players that fit your club, right? So for Manchester United, a right back needs to have certain characteristics, right? And for Inter Milan, a right back has to have different characteristics. But for both Manchester United and Inter Milan, we need number 4 is important, right? Because both of them need to have players that contribute directly to points and league position, right? So let's go through these steps. Firstly, our objectives and squad performance level, right? So we've chosen Manchester United as an example, and you might say Manchester United and Moneyball doesn't really work because Manchester United have a lot of money. Moneyball is more about clubs that don't have money that are trying to compete. Well, we'll show you an example of how we define Moneyball, how Billy Beane defines Moneyball, and how every club can have their own little version of Moneyball in football, and how you can still find those undervalued talents and use them to reach your objective, whilst not looking at things that the market is overvaluing. So Manchester United, in terms of the objective, we've set an objective of 4th position, right, to get into the Champions League positions. And what we've done is we've taken the last 5 years, we've taken the performance level required to reach the Champions League positions. So you can see the solid green line is the last 5 years required expected goal difference level to reach 4th position in the Premier League, right? So That's a big sample of data to tell you, look, probably if you want to be finishing in the top 4, this is your required level, right? So what do we do now? We look at United's current squad performance level, which is at negative 0.01 expected goal difference per game, right? So if last season was played out 10,000 times, Manchester United's goal difference would probably have been 0, right? For a club of the size of Manchester United, it's quite horrible. And if they want to be in 4th position, or at least challenging for 4th position, because we under no illusion that football is a very difficult game to analyze and break down. We never have the answer, but you can reduce the risk and sort of get to a ballpark of the right answer, right? So if you probably want to be finishing in the top 4 most seasons, you need to be at an expected goal difference of 0.5 per game, right? So that's a goal difference of 19 per season, right? So Manchester United currently, if we now look at where they currently are performing and where their objective performance is, there's a difference of 0.51 expected goal difference per game, right? So that's scoring goals minus conceding goals, right? And we've set a budget of 100 million euros for them for the purpose of this exercise. So now that we've got, we need to now basically go out into the market and find 0.51 expected goal difference above what we currently have in the squad, right? So we go back to the steps that we have. This is the important number 4 that I spoke about. So what you do now is, now that you're trying to fill that 0.51 gap to get to 4th position, you need to look who are the players in your team that are contributing the least to points and league position, right? So this final score is attacking and defensive contribution, directly correlated to league table, points, goals scored and conceded, and ultimately the club's objective, right? So what we've done here is not have an index with tackling stats, passing stats, running stats, all these kind of things. We've looked at stats that directly affect what is happening on the league table, because that's the 0.51 gap that we're trying to close, right? And what we've done with the final score here is we've made it relative to everyone's position, because if you compare Bruno Fernandes to Rafael Varane, an attacking midfielder is always going to look better than a centre-back on just pure how many goals does he contribute, how many goals does he prevent. But you want to be seeing in each position which of my players, relative to his position, is contributing the least to the league table, right? So now that we've done that, we've identified Scott McTominay, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and Marcus Rashford to be the only 3 players with a negative final score, as you can see. And that means they are below the benchmark that we've set. And the benchmark we've set here is Europe's top 5 leagues. That's where we'll be scouting for this example for Manchester United, right? So now what we do, we take those 3 players, we simulate as if they are out of our squad, and now we go into the market with our restrictions that we've set here of 100 million and looking for 0.51. We go out into the market. Apologies, we're just having some jumping issues. I think it should settle now. Just try and go past. Apologies for this. Apologies. We'll try and sort that out to get to slide number 15. It's evading me here. But anyway, now that we've identified what our restrictions are and who the 3 players are that we want to be replacing, I see there it's found its rest, luckily. We now enter all of this into our model. So we've basically broken down this football this football problem of recruitment into a math problem, right? So we've got a bunch of restrictions. We know who the players are that are contributing the least to our objective in the league table, and now we basically telling our model, go and find us players that can get us to our objective, right? Based on all these restrictions. And as you can see, it then comes up with a bunch of combinations, right? So it says to us, you need to be signing these combinations of players. And as you can see in the estimated log position column, it will get you to fourth position in all likelihood, right? And it also tells you how much the improvement is. You can see the top combination is an improvement of 0.71, right? So that is bigger than 0.51, which then tells you that it will get you to fourth position. As you can see, to get to third position in the Premier League is much more difficult, but we'll settle for fourth, which is our objective within a 100 million budget. So to get to this point, we obviously adjust stats between different leagues based on league strength. And this is where the different tools that I spoke about that we built to put into the process comes in, right? So, I mean, if you're going to be looking for players in France, Germany, and Spain and Italy to bring to England, obviously 5 goals in Italy is not worth 5 goals in England. So we've developed a tool which then takes all of these teams and like Brentford have made famous, we create one basically European Super League for the top 5 leagues, and then you are able to see what is the difference in strength between these leagues, right? Using Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League games to help the model with calculating that. What we also do is we ensure that there's a good mix of passers and shot takers in your team, because that is one of the things that we'll get to that is different from baseball and Moneyball, where football is not a one-to-one sport where someone throws the ball and someone hits the ball and someone tries to catch it, right? It's a very static game where football is a lot more fluent. So you need to build in a lot of things. I mean, you don't want to be presenting a lot of players that are creative players, but you've got no one that has the movement to be in a position to finish, or people that are able to take shots, right? You want a good mix of that, along with what we'll explain now, to sort of ensure that this is not just a football manager thing where you trying to get your expected goals as high as possible, but that you're also thinking of the nature of football and that it's fluid and all these kind of things, right? So now that we have this list of combinations, right, it's very important to understand that these players need to be signed in combination. So when you look at combination 1, which is the one that improves Manchester United the most, right, it's within a 100 million budget. It's Serginho Dest, Juan Mi, and Frankie de Jong, right? So a club needs to understand that you need to sign those 3 in combination. So you replace Wan-Bissaka with Dest, Rashford with Juan Mi, and McTominay with de Jong. If you do that, you'll have an estimated improvement of 0.71 expected goal difference per game, which gets you reasonably, in most seasons, into the top 4, right? And it's going to cost you 100 million. But what I said earlier about how does a club with 100 million relate to Moneyball? If you take your eyes down to combination number 8, right? Now we've got Serginho Dest again, right? But now we have Toko Ekambi replacing Rashford and Luis Alberto replacing McTominay. And that will give you an improvement of 0.69 expected goal difference per 90, which is just, it's not even a goal per season less than the top combination we just spoke about, but it's going to cost you around 35 million euros less. So if you're saying Moneyball is identifying, using data to identify things in the market that are undervalued, then a 35 million euro saving on a 100 million budget is doing exactly that, right? So Moneyball isn't just for clubs that don't have money that are trying to compete, but it's also about competing and finding undervalued assets that give you the same output, right? And that's all about having a process and sort of quantifying where you want to be, where you currently are, and then letting the computer do the work for you. Because to get to these 10 combinations, our model ran 35,000 combinations, right? And I mean, it can run a lot more. It was just for this example, right? So there's no human being that I know of, at least, that can run 35,000 combinations, tell you these are the top 10, and this is sort of how we rank them, right? So now that we have these 10 top combinations that can get you into the top 4, there are loads more. As you can see, number 10 is 0.69, which is still some way off our bottom of 0.51. So there are a lot more. We just kept it to 10. Now that you have these 10, right? Now we know these 10 combinations are players that can get us to our objective, right? How did we get there? We looked at stats that directly correlate to the league table, right? So we haven't looked at their playing style or their specific characteristics, right? So that's what we're going to do now. Now we take this list of 10 combinations, and now we sit with the club and we do another ranking, right? So the ranking that you saw, sort of these, the ranking that we did in assessing who to drop from our squad. We do another one similar to that. But now we sit with a club and we say, in a right back, what are you looking for? In a left wing, what are you looking for? In a right wing, what are you looking for? All these kind of things, right? So that we can then benchmark these players in this list of combinations to what Manchester United are looking for in each of their positions, right? And then you rank them according to their Manchester United characteristics, if you want to say it like that, because now I know all of these combinations can get me to 4th place. Now I just need to find the best fit for Manchester United, and we do that with the data, right? So now that you've got the ranking based on Manchester United characteristics, you give that to your scouts or your recruitment team and you say, these guys we know can get us into the top 4. This is what the data says in terms of suitability for Manchester United. Now go and watch them and tell us who you think are the best ones. And then you merge the eye test with what the data is telling you, with the knowledge that all of these guys can get us into the top 4. Apologies, I keep on hammering on that, but it's so important because everything we did before doing the rankings is so important, because it gives you that comfort of, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, and this is a list of players that can get me there, right? Where similarity apps or features don't tell you. They tell you if players are similar to the ones you currently have, great, but they don't tell you if they can help you to reach your objectives, which essentially is the main thing, right? So just to tie all of this together and sort of say how this is similar to Moneyball, and what does Moneyball actually mean, because you hear a lot about Moneyball, and anytime a club uses data to scout players, or they sign a player and he does well the next season, it's Moneyball left, right, and center. But Billy Beane actually said Moneyball was overlooking traditional received wisdom around player scouting and recruitment, and using data instead to critically find what the market undervalues, right? So in baseball, this was finding players that create runs, that create wins, right? Rather than having players that are tall, can sell jerseys, look like a baseball player, and hit far, has a good swing, has a good throw, all these kind of things. Finding players that contribute to runs, that contribute to wins, that contribute to championships, right? So in football, this means basically finding players that create, score, or prevent goals, which is correlated to points and league position, rather than players that dribble well, are Brazilian, look like footballers, whatever that means, because all of these things are overvalued by the football transfer market. And if you're looking to climb the league table, right, and you want to be doing that on a budget, you need to be looking where the market isn't looking. So if the market is looking at players that dribble well, they're looking at Brazilian players, they're looking at players that look like footballers. I mean, I hope I don't offend any Italian listeners we have, but I mean, if you see an Italian defender, immediately is much better than, let's say, a South African defender, which might be the case, but not always, and not always by as much as you think. But Italians just look like defenders, right? That I mean, you always hear commentators say he's a proper defender, right? For us, a proper defender is someone that restricts the other team from creating or taking chances, right? That's a proper defender. But the football transfer market, as Billy Beane said, traditional received wisdom around player scouting and recruitment looks at different things just because we are influenced by bias and fan pressure and all these kind of things. But if you have a process in place that allows you to put different tools in the right stage of the process, you can eliminate a lot of those bias. And at the end, when you really need scouting experience and the eye test, you can do it with a much smaller list than 50 right backs, right? We've whittled that list. We've shown you. We've whittled it down from 35,000 to 10, right? So that gives your scouts, the football people who've been in the industry for a long time, whose opinion and knowledge and experience is so critically important. But to make their jobs easier, you need to have something like this, which is a process and having the right tools in the right place. So just a key element I want to highlight that is a big difference between baseball and football. Obviously, with baseball being a very static sport, much easier to analyze, and football, I mean, in baseball, your profiles of players don't really need to match each other as well as they need to do in football. So that's a really important thing, that player profiles need to complement each other, right? So that's what we spoke about, the 4NFC characteristics score, which is basically saying in a right back, I want this for my team. In a left wing, I want this in my team. If I'm playing two central midfielders, the one should be like this and the other one should be like this in terms of certain stats, certain running stats, physical appearance, these kind of things, right? But having that at the right stage of the process is really important. And then also an interesting, I mean, we've mentioned it, but it's a very critical, important as well, trying to have roughly the same expected goals as expected assists in your team. I mean, like we've mentioned before, you don't want a bunch of guys that just shoot. You want to, and you don't just want creators, right? Creating for nobody. You want a good mix of creators creating for finishers or guys that take shots, right? And then you complement all this by the scouts and your recruitment's eye test, which, as I said, is critically important. This is just trying to make things easier for them and sort of so the football people can do football things, you know. So yes, I mean, it's been great having all of you for the webinar. And I mean, if this is a product and sort of this process and the tools that we've built is a product that we've now been rolling out in this transfer window to clubs in South America, North America, Africa, Europe. So it's a work in progress. I mean, it's always a work in progress in the sense that we always try, and it's a work in progress to change people's minds about what they're doing, but it's not difficult to prove the value. I mean, we showed you in the Manchester United example, yes, Toko Ekambi and Luis Alberto might not be as fashionable and look as good and all these kind of things as Juanmi and Frankie de Jong. I mean, Frankie de Jong was part of that wonderful Ajax side that had the great run in the Champions League. Luis Alberto, not so much, but I mean, if you're a club that's looking to find value in the market where others aren't looking, then this process and these solutions are for you. And contact us. And I mean, it'll be great to have clubs on board and help them with sort of establishing these processes and, like I said, finding value in the market, which, based on all the inefficiencies we found, is definitely there. And it would be great to answer some of your questions now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for such an interesting and real cases, right? And we can see that we have a lot of questions from the audience. So some of them you already, I believe, answered, but I'm gonna repeat it again so you can, answer one on one, right? Yeah, Hari says that, hi, how do you define success for a player transfer, Brandon?
I mean, thanks, Hari, for the question. I think that is very dependent on what your club is. I mean, that's always the first question that when we sit with clubs, we ask them, who are you and why are you the way you are. I think it might sound a little bit brash, but it's so important for clubs to understand who they are, where they currently are, and where they want to go, right? So, I mean, for a club that their objective is to stay in the league, right? I mean, anything between 10th and 15th, and they just want to develop players and sell them, which keeps the club going. I mean, their success for a player transfer is successfully selling that player at a profit, right? Whereas for, let's say, an FC Barcelona, who needs to be challenging for trophies all the time because of who they are, where they are, and sort of where they want to be all the time. Success of a player transfer is trophies, right? So if that player contributes to the team winning and reaching their objectives, then that's a success. So I think it's definitely it depends on what your objectives are with that transfer and in general.
Thank you, Brendan. And how do you say this again? Do you use these dashboards from third-party companies? And if yes, all of them or which ones?
So I mean, there are a lot of good products out there, and like I said earlier, this is not a, it's not a stab at these products. I'm actually like a lot of them. It's just more how people use them, and I think it's the same thing with data, right? So I can see that very much in South African football, where everyone is now scrambling to get a hold of data, but that scrambling, I mean, it doesn't help if you get the data and you don't know what to do with it, right? So the same with these dashboards from third-party companies. I think there are different solutions for different clubs and different styles and these kind of things. It really depends on what you want, but there are a couple that I really like, and I mean, we've used examples of C Sports and StatsBomb IQ, and for us, these are the really good ones, and the ones that are better for me is the ones that you can tailor to specific needs of your club. I mean, because that's always the customer is always the most important, right? So if a club wants to customize some of your things and you allow for that will always get the best results.
Bruno Pesotti, hi Bruno. He says, "Good morning. How to reduce the impact of subjectivity, analyst personality in qualitative analysis?"
Yes, I think thanks Bruno for the question. I think that's why we try and have a process, right? Because there are a lot of steps where we use data and sort of we try and have as little as possible wiggle room for subjectivity, as you mean. But we try and it's going to sound strange, but we try and give the analysts that do the qualitative analysis a safe list, right? So that list of 10 combinations, I would be happy to give that list to my analysts because I know, regardless of who they pick here, I know the data is telling me we're probably going to reach our objectives, right? So even if your analyst picks the worst combination of the 10, it's a safe bet, you know? So I think it's important to trust your analysts, but to also build in a safety net for them so that you don't want someone doing their job thinking, oh man, if I get this wrong, we're going to be relegated. I mean, if you tell an analyst, look, these are the 10 combinations, I'm happy with all 10 of them. You are the football guy. I need your honest, stress-free, risk-free opinion on these. You'll get the best results.
Can play attractive football be an objective in your model, says Aldo?
It can, yes, Aldo. Thank you. I think that is the final step. So we obviously we don't look because attractive football is yet again it's almost every manager that joins a new club says we want to play attractive football and entertain the fans and all these kind of things. But attractive football doesn't mean anything up until the last step for us, right? So we try and see players that can get us up the league. And then if attractive football is part of our DNA of our club, which for a lot of clubs it isn't. A lot of clubs it's just about results, right? I mean, if you have a club which has no fans, playing attractive football is not necessary, right? But if attractive football is part of your DNA and who you are, where you want to be, the last step sort of where the analysts come in, that sort of takes care of that yet again, because your analysts might look at two players who have similar output and they help the team in an offensive and a defensive way equally, but the one does it in a nicer way, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm a big fan of any player with the left foot because it just looks different. But if the output is the same, that's where we can find attractive football. But not before that, because attractive football, in terms of the league position, doesn't mean anything.
From where do you get the budget and other information? Do you rely on internal sources? Said Hadi again.
Yes. So thanks, Hadi. I think transfer values and market values are always is probably the most difficult thing in football. It's something that we're working on to internally have and be able to tell clubs this is the range of values that you need to be looking at for certain players. It's a process. It's very subjective. So just for this example and to build out the model up to date, we use the budget we estimated. I mean, it's not like we have a source at Manchester United, Fabrizio Romano, or someone telling us this is United's budget. But other things we internally try and use sort of statistical modeling yet again to get to those answers, to be able to tell the club that you're working with, look, this is how we got to this amount. The market might think 60 million, let's say, but we think more in the region of 30 to 40, and this is why, right? And that could be your edge, because transfer values are also affected by these things that we call la-di-da things that aren't real. Like, I'm not saying not real, but like attractive football, it's not something that you can put a number on. Like, he looks like a centre-back, he looks like a Manchester United player, 10 million extra. I mean, if you can quantify things without looking at those biases, you'll have a competitive advantage. So,
Yeah. AGD just says, how do you minimize or solve the possible negative impact of inaccurately collected data on the young players playing at the lower leagues? It's a very good question.
yeah, it is. AGD, thank you very much for your question. So that's obviously a big risk when working with data. I mean, it's like this with anything in life. I mean, before getting going, you need to first check the source or check where you're starting from, right? So we believe that, I mean, of course, you can see with clubs like Southampton at the moment, they are taking a lot of chances on young players. And I mean, when I say chances, I'm not saying they rolling the dice or they don't know what they're doing, but the information available on those players is a lot less. That's why they're getting them for cheaper, right? So it's always a risk and reward thing, right? So we believe that there are clubs that prefer doing this, but then sort of I'm trying to say that if you have a big enough sample size for data can help you with a lot in the process. Where the less data you have, the earlier in the process you need to be having your analysts and your qualitative and your eye test and these kind of things. And as we know, that is influenced by a lot of things. So the risk is much bigger. And I mean, if you look at the big data providers, it costs you to get the most accurate data. But I mean, there's a trade-off, right? If you're going to go for a cheap option in terms of data, or you want to collect data yourself, but you're not so sure how it's being collected, is it accurate? I mean, you know the risks of doing that. And I mean, later it could come back to bite you.
Yeah. Aldo wants to know if you use the social media forum qualitative data of selling clubs to look at the meaning of their fans who know their team well.
Yes, I think it's a very good question as well. I think it's the wisdom of the crowd, right? So I don't think it's far off from that. I think it's something that's not yet. I don't think clubs are quite ready for it. But I mean, wisdom of the crowd. I mean, you know, these guys, they watch their team week in, week out, and they know these players. They follow them on social media, all these kind of things. So I think it's not far off. I think you would need to do a lot of testing on that and the reliability of that. But I think it's definitely a form of engagement with your fans. I mean, you know, the fans love nothing more than a transfer window. So it's definitely It's not something we currently do, but it's a very good question or suggestion for sure.
Great. Francesco, with another very good question as well, said, um, how about the players that are not playing? And that can be a great opportunity for a different club. Example, a reserve of Manchester United can be great in Juventus, but you don't have data from him. How do you do it?
Yep. That's a very good question, Francesco. And I think, I mean, it comes back to what I said previously. The less data you have, the more you'll be relying on the eye test, the experience of your scouts, the experience of your recruitment team to supplement the little data that you have available. Of course, we prefer to have a lot of data, but I mean, even for reserve team players, you'll have some data, right? It's just about understanding the context of that data. So, in which league was this played? I mean, can you really judge someone that played 15 minutes each game for a whole season, even though that might add up to a lot of data? I mean, it takes a few minutes to get going, and then a team is wasting time, and all these kind of things, right? So, I think to understand the context, that's important because that will drive who you rely on. Do you rely on that data, even though it's a little bit of data, or do you then rely on the experience and the people side of things?
Nicolas, a big fan of River Plate, well, one of the t-shirts that you have behind you. Yeah, he comments, first of all, I love the River shirt behind you. Having in consideration that the model is made with current performance data, how does this model help clubs find opportunity in undervalued players? For example, he said, Neil Mupay in Brentford.
Yes, Nicholas, I'm glad you like the shirt. I'm also a big River Plate fan. We um, we actually work with them, so it's quite an honor for us to work with such a famous club. And I mean the shirt is beautiful, hence it being being on the wall. But thank you very much. And yes, I mean, look, clubs, you need to understand that finding undervalued players, right, is all about looking where other clubs aren't looking, right? So we've got a couple of examples of how we do this, and we've actually done what Brentford have done, where we set up this. They call it the Justice League, right? So what we've done for this model is we've taken the 98 teams in Europe's top 5 leagues, and we've taken their league games, Champions League games, Europa League games, and Conference League games, and we've created one big table, so from 1 to 98, right? So if the model then runs all of those games against each other, and it basically comes up with that league ranking, right? And that's all based on expected goals data, right? So firstly, there's your first differentiator, because a lot of clubs are looking at actual goals, and we know that football is a very random sport, average score of 2-1. So that gives you one defining moment every 30 minutes, right? Whereas a sport like rugby or cricket, where the scoring is much higher, there's a lot less randomness. So using expected goals, which tells you a lot more about the actual performance rather than luck, that's your first differentiator, right? So now in this league of 1 to 98, we can probably see that a club in France's Ligue 1, which is possibly, let's say, in sixth position, is around about mid-table in the Premier League, right? So now already the French league is undervalued, right? Because people don't trust the French league. They call it the Farmers League, all these kind of things, right? I won't say which league I think is really the Farmers League, but anyway. So now you go look at that club in the French league and you say, okay, players from this league or from this team, I know are sort of at the level of mid-table Premier League. But if you compare what players in the French division in sixth place cost compared to mid-table in the Premier League is double, if not triple, the price. So there you've already found undervalued players, right? This is how Leicester City and Brentford found N'Golo Kante in France's second division, right? It's just Leicester were in the Premier League at that stage, and obviously he was going to go there. But that's exactly what they did. To see clubs in leagues that are undervalued, like the French league, like the Italian league, and see and benchmark them to leagues that are really expensive, right? So now if you bring a player from the sixth place in France and you put him in mid-table in the Premier League, and he plays well for a season, you sell him on to someone also in the mid-table of the Premier League, and there you've made your money. So that is how we would use the model to find undervalued players, and that's exactly how Brentford do it.
A question from Jack Scott. With the three-player combinations, is there a risk that a club will ultimately only be able to sign 2 or 3 of the players, which will lead to a different or insufficient XGA?
Yes, Jack, that's a very good question and a very real question. I mean, because all of this is on Excel and on a computer, but the transfer market moves really quickly and changes a lot. So what we do in this situation is that every time they sign a player, right, in the combination, then the model adjusts the players that are remaining, right? So I mean, if you sign, like you saw in that example, Serginho Dest, there's only 2 combinations left, right? So, I mean, I just showed you the top 10, but there are 35,000, right? So if you sign Serginho Dest, you might be left with 500, right? So now you sign the second player, you sign Juanmi, now there's only 13 left. So if a club can't find a player left in that 13, yes, then you have to go back and you say, look, now if you can't sign these players, of course, this will be the effect of your expected goals and what will be on the league table. But like I said, with 35,000 combinations, it adjusts every time, and there will be enough players left at the end. And something that's also very possible. I mean, we sit with clubs with that list of combinations, and they might immediately say, "Okay, we don't like Serginho Dest." Then we replace him, and the model gives you a new list. So yes, things change very quickly, but it's just a matter of updating the model, and it'll give you options. And I mean, if the players aren't available to get you into fourth position, you might tell the club, okay, you might have to spend a 10 million extra, right? I mean, it's if the players aren't there, the players aren't there, right? I mean, there's unfortunately we haven't got a model to create extra players yet. Maybe one day.
Not yet, right?
Not yet.
Lee Davidson. Because clubs cannot be certain to secure the players they want, do you also model the impact of only securing the transfer in of 1 or 2 of the preferred combination?
Yes. So to touch on Jack's question, Lee, thanks for your question. Also a very valid one. So, like I said, if you sign Serginho Dest, it automatically includes him into your squad and sort of shows you where you will be on the league table if you just sign Serginho Dest. Let's say you'll be in 6th position. Now, if you sign Juanmi, it'll tell you might now be in 5th position. But to take that leap to 4th position, you need to sign Frankie de Jong, which is the full combination, right? And if you only sign Frankie de Jong, it might take you to 5th position, but you need the other 2 to get to 4th. So it does show you every step of the way, but the full combination is the one that gets you there.
Thanks, Brendan. A question from Joshua Caro. Do you measure or take in consideration factors that could change the chemistry of the squad by bringing certain players, like players' nationalities, age?
So of course you would sit with the club and I mean where we did the squad evaluation, the first one where we excluded McTominay, Wan-Bissaka and Rashford. I mean, for a club like Manchester United, who always need to have English representation, they might tell you, look, Marcus Rashford means something for us as a person, as a British player, someone who came through the academy. So despite the model saying he's contributing the least, we need to have him in our squad, right? Then there is a possibility to say, okay, we don't take Marcus Rashford out, we take out the next one. So that's a process of sitting with the club and saying, look, this is what the model says, but obviously there are human factors and certain things going on behind the scenes, especially with Manchester United, as you all know. And then we just adjust it. I mean, it's not a rigid thing. And like I said, with the other providers, being flexible and being able to customize your solution to your client is super important. And we do that. And they might say, look, our age bracket is a bit high. Let's look for players between 21 and 23. You put that into the model, it only looks for those kind of players. Easy.
Ulrich Jensen says hi, and how do you go about comparing data and skills across leagues, like a player with great stats and the Georgian league versus a medium player in the French League One?
Yeah, so I mean that's exactly what I explained in terms of Neil Maupay at Brentford, where you would use games between Georgian teams and French teams and teams that they played against each other. So let's say a Georgian team played against a Serbian team and a French team also played against a Serbian team. You would use all of those games, put it into the model, and it will tell you what is the difference between the Georgian league and the medium player in Ligue 1, right? So then when I'm a French team looking to scout in Georgia and I see a player in the Georgian league that is averaging 0.5 goals and assists per game, right? If I just take that 0.5 and try to bring it to the French league, it's not going to be 0.5, right? So our model can tell you this 0.5 is maybe 0.35 in the French league, right? So then you know, look, what is 0.35 goals and assists per game worth in the French league? And then you know, look, this will be the level of the player. This is what I should be paying for him. So we've got that model where you use the games between different leagues to be able to solve this problem.
All right. Jack again says, which league is the Formers?
I think Jack, we can talk offline a bit about the Farmers League. I've got a few interesting opinions about that, but not yet.
Yeah. Aldo says, maybe we also need a conceded expected goals index.
Yes, so it is something that we take into account. It is something that's also available. So it's a stat that is called expected goals against while on the pitch. So it basically looks at what was a team's expected goals against while that person was on the pitch. That might sound obvious from the name, but it differs for each player in the team, right? Because no team that I know of plays every 11 players every single match, right? So you might have two centre backs, your two main centre backs. The one has a rating of 0.6, which means when he's on the pitch, his team concedes 0.6 goals per game, right? But the other centre back might have a rating of 0.8, which means when he's on the pitch, the team concedes 0.8. So that tells you the one centre back is probably worth more in terms of not conceding goals or opportunities than the other centre back. So it is a great stat that I really, really like because, as you all know, quantifying and judging defensive capability and contribution is really, really difficult, whereas the other ways is much easier. So it's a stat that I really like and we use a lot.
Salvador wants to know if is there any way to include in your assessment the impact of players in terms of social media followers, attraction, brand value increase. I think this is something you already mentioned in a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah. So I mean, we look at things that can make you climb the league table, right? Because yet again, we said we're looking at footballing objectives, right? Obviously, you'll find, especially with Manchester United, there's always different things going on, and that will come out in the discussion of the squad, the sort of targeting players that we're targeting and these kind of things. But in our model, it's not something built in because that's a non-footballing thing.
Yeah. Ulrich share with us that do you incorporate injury history? Well, this is a good one, both in terms of frequencies and missed playing time, but also more importantly, and two, risk related to injuries hampering skills going forward, kind of like actuarians accessing insurance risks.
Yeah, Ulrich, it's a very good assessment there, and also a good link to the actuaries we're working with at ZAQ. Currently, we incorporate it right at the end. I mean, when we sit and we have the list now where we say these are the combinations that can get you to your objective, and these are the guys that have the characteristics for your team, right? But as a side note, we would say these guys are probably a bigger risk because of their injury history. It's not something that sort of decreases their output, and it's something that you would immediately see if it's a real concern for us. it would be reflected in the minutes played, right? So we have a standard minimum amount of minutes that a player needs to be playing for us to be able to say this is his true level of football. And if a player really has injuries that prevent him from playing those minutes, he won't even pop up in our model.
And the last question of the session, Brendan, from Jack again. He says, no problem. Will you also assess other teams' signings and their team's AGA? With Manchester United example, if the fourth best team has now signed players leading to XGA of 0.6, Manchester United will now need to recruit better than 0.5 AGA to reach Champions League football. It's very technical. I love it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yes, Jack, I think we can definitely have a coffee afterwards and talk about the Farmers League and all these technical things. It's really great. Good question. I think it's actually a question that came up when I had a meeting with the sporting director last week, from South Africa, and he asked the same question. He said, "Look, we're trying to benchmark ourselves. There are certain teams that we are chasing, right? So they're probably chasing one or two teams, whether that be on a domestic level or a continental level, right? So let's say Manchester United know that the fourth best team in England at this stage is Tottenham, right? So you can then benchmark yourself to that team because you know that is the one that you're chasing, right? So for Liverpool, it's Manchester City, and for Manchester City, it's Liverpool. So it's definitely something we do. We do take into account changes in the squad, and sort of we do exactly what we do with the model, just with all these teams to say, this is now the level. So the level is normally around this. If some clubs don't want to be chasing other teams, we can say, look, probably this is the level. But if you want to go really granular, we can chase a certain team, right? Or a certain level. That's definitely possible. And it's basically just applying this model to what other teams are doing and reverse engineering that a little bit, if that makes sense, Jack.
Fantastic. Well, Brandon, thank you very, very much for sharing all this information with us and such an innovative model with all the attendees. Yeah, we hope to see you again very soon with another session.
Thank you, Edgar. Thank you for everyone that tuned in and for all the questions. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. And on behalf of Johan Cruyff Institute and Four Nation Football Consulting, I want to thank everyone for attending the session. We had today a very active audience, which is very, very good. We're happy to see that. And as I mentioned before, you will soon receive a link with the webinar recording in case you want to watch the session again. We invite you to stay connected. Thanks again and see you soon. Bye-bye.